Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Chem 1210. If you're just coming in, there is some seating still upstairs in the balcony. The stairs are in the very back, so welcome to class. Hope you're excited to take chemistry this semester. Our plan for today is to do a quick course, well, maybe not a quick course intro, but I'll take as much time as it takes this morning to introduce the course, go over some of our policies so that you're sort of up to speed on how the class is going to work. Talk a little bit about the syllabus, a little bit about Carmen, so you can see how those will be used throughout the semester. Maybe get into a couple slides, maybe do a quick little demo here to end class, towards the end of class. There's a few links on this page, so I'll leave this up here for a moment or two. The links are just over to Carmen, so however you can get the Carmen works too. But in lecture slides, you can either follow the link here, the QR code, or just go to Carmen, go to modules, and look for lecture slides. And then also, there's a bunch of start of term tasks, what the other link is for. If you haven't checked that out, once you get into our main page of Carmen or through that QR code, you can get linked to all the startup tasks for getting into your homework, setting up your lab manual access, taking all the lab quizzes and things you need to do to start the semester. Okay, so before we get too far along, I think it's always nice to kind of introduce ourselves to each other. Might be a little bit hard for us to do an icebreaker around the room like you might do in some of your smaller classes. But as you come into office hours, if you come up and talk after class in the first couple weeks of class, feel free to introduce yourself in terms of what your name is, where you're from, what your major is, and maybe something that you did that was fun over the summer or something you might want to share, especially if you come into office hours just so we have a chance to get to know each other. But I'll introduce myself to you. Like I said, I'm Dr. Steve Kroner. I'm originally from the Youngstown, Ohio area. Where's my Youngstown contingent? Anybody? Nobody made it out of Youngstown this year. Oh my God. Usually there's like two hands that go up. But that's kind of between Cleveland and Pittsburgh is geographically where Youngstown is, if you're not familiar. I did my undergrad here at OSU. I went away to grad school to Cornell, came back here and started this job in 2008. So I've been teaching Gen Chem in the fall since 2009. So I really like having the fall group. Have a lot of pre-med students. Where's the pre-med crowd in the room? Pre-dental, pre-health, all those kind of hands could go up too. So a lot of you guys are going off into professions in the healthcare industry. So I really like kind of giving you guys a good start, hoping you get off to a great start with your chemistry that then can lead itself into your later chemistries and physics and all those other classes you're going to have to take to get towards med school. So a few other things about me. I have wife, 2 kids. My kids are 7th and 9th graders, into a lot of sports. So if you're into talking sports, stop by office hours. My 7th grade daughter plays volleyball, basketball, softball. My son plays, well, he played basketball. I think he's retired, but he's a big baseball player. So most of my summer is spent chasing tournaments. I think we had 4 weekends in a row for softball and baseball tournaments on the road. So that's always fun. That was most of my summer. Why don't we take a couple minutes for you guys to introduce yourselves to your neighbors? So kind of exchange information with your neighbors, where you're from, what your majors are, those sort of things. So let's take a couple minutes for that. All right. Thanks for that. Thank you, guys. So one of the things just from the past classes I've done, I don't know if I'll get the class back. I have to do a cartwheel. I cannot do a cartwheel. Okay, guys. So one of the things I learned, I used to survey the class in terms of where everyone's from to get a sense. I mean, we usually have 20 to 30 countries represented in every class. We usually have like half or more of the counties in Ohio represented in this room. We have students from nearby, from far away. You got a chance to meet some of your classmates just in that few minutes there. Every lecture we have, I think, is important to come together and hear and share ideas, and to also, at some times in class, be able to take breaks, ask questions to your neighbors. So there'll be a lot of moments in class where I throw out questions to you guys, give you a chance to talk to your neighbors and participate and try to learn from each other. So hopefully that's the first of many conversations you get to have in this class, and that's not the only time you get to take a break and kind of talk amongst yourselves during class. Okay, so I'm gonna move off that slide. So again, if you're looking for the slides, if you're just coming in, just go to Carmen modules. I'll show a few things in Carmen later too to make sure we're all clear on how to find things. A few things you might be wondering. The e-text access is already kind of paid for through your student fees, so you don't have to buy a textbook. If you go to the bookstore, which I don't know if you guys even do that anymore because there's not that many classes that require hard books, but don't buy anything from the bookstore in terms of a textbook for this class. Your access is already paid for through something called Carmen Books, and you just have to go into Pearson and kind of follow the links. In the Startup Tasks link, there's some information on how to set up your file if you're not sure, but it's really just following the prompts. The only thing that gets a little bit tricky is if you already have a Pearson account, you might just want to make a new one. That's sometimes a little bit easier, just so that you know the password and login information and can get that stored on your device. But if you had a high school class that used Pearson, sometimes it gets a little bit hairy and following the instructions. But I may just recommend, if you do have an old Pearson account and you're not sure of the details, just start with a fresh one and choose a new email to set that up. So just make sure you don't pay again for the access. A few clicks can go wrong and Pearson may try to get you to pay again for the service. Don't pay again, that something was clicked wrong. There are some tech office hours in the Startup Tasks. There's some information there. If you need help finding it, just reach out to me and I'll help you find it. But there should be some tech support office hours. I think they're mostly through Zoom, but you can meet with some tech support from Pearson if you get stuck in setting up your textbook access. Labs and recitation this week, are they meeting? Labs tomorrow are not meeting. I think everybody has lab tomorrow. Some of you guys may have had lab on Tuesday already. That didn't happen either. The only thing that's happened this week so far already is recitations met yesterday, but that wasn't required for attendance, so if you missed, that's okay. They were just going over some recitation policies and a couple like introductory problems that involve like finding elements on the periodic table and that kind of basic stuff. There's a short activity up on Carmen that you can look at if you want to see the slides that were sent out to your TAs to review this week, so you can check that out. There's a couple simple problems. I'll throw a key up. I can't remember if it's already posted or not, but if there's not a key up yet, I'll make sure a key's up for the few problems at the end of that activity. What do you do if you miss lab or recitation throughout the semester? We'll talk a little bit later too that lecture attendance is going to be taken with some kind of alternative assignments that are available. If you miss those things, what should you do? Well, with recitation, you get one drop. We'll talk about more recitation policies on a slide later, but you get one drop in recitation that everybody gets without even needing to email your TA. So if you miss once, there's nothing that needs to be done. We recommend that you try to not miss more than once because we give you that one dropped assignment to count for and to allow for that one absence throughout the semester. So try to save that one drop for when you really need to miss if you're not feeling well. If something happens and you need to miss more than one, reach out to me and we'll come up with a way for you to make up that week's activity. Usually just through doing the activity, sending it to your TA by a deadline. If you miss lab, check out the lab syllabus and the lab announcements that they send out. I don't interact a lot with the lab, so I can't answer a lot of your lab questions. So if you miss lab, you don't necessarily want to email me. You might want to email your TA or just check out the syllabus and see what it says you're supposed to do. Every semester they make slight modifications in how to reach out to them, but check out the lab team's emails, their syllabus. They have a separate syllabus too. So see what you need to do with the lab if you miss a lab. And we'll talk a little bit more later about the lecture attendance stuff, but for that you're gonna get a bunch of drops. You'll get like 6 drops. So try to use those when you need them. And then there's also alternative assignments that we'll talk about that you can do in lieu of coming. Office hours, let's talk about what those are. For some reason, they're not putting the office hours on syllabi anymore. So if you're looking for my office hours, just know that they're not going to be found on the syllabus. For some reason, they couldn't squeeze that into the 14 other pages of content they throw into the syllabus. But my office hours are listed here. They're also, and I'll show you this later, they're in the contacts area. There's a link on the main page of Carmen that takes you to a contacts. It has office hours for the lab supervisor, for the TAs, and for mine as well. And so mine are Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at various times. Monday afternoons, Wednesday mid-morning, Friday right after class. If you have questions, I'm always happy to stay as long as there's questions after class. We can go into the hallway, usually out this way. This way just goes into the basement. There's an elevator. You can jump back up to go to the first floor. But if you have questions after class, just head down here. If we're getting close to the start of the next class at 9:10, we'll just head into the hallway, wrap up your questions, and then that is totally fair. Every single lecture, I'll stay as long as you guys have questions. For office hours, you don't need an appointment for anybody's office hours. Office hours are kind of meant to be an open door where, for me, for the TAs, for the lab supervisors, when you see office hours, for all your instructors, it should be the thought that the door is open for you to walk in without announcement or without emailing to let the instructor know that you're coming in. So feel free to stop by as much or as often as you wish throughout the semester. I'm happy to help with homework problems. I'm happy to help with recitation problems. I can try to help lab too if you have lab questions. The more policy lab questions are better for lab TAs and the lab team, but if you have questions on like a lab report question, understanding a lab concept, certainly you can bring those my way. The TA office hours this semester are a little bit different than they've done in the past, so this is slightly confusing, I think, but they're in two different locations, but with mostly the same hours with slightly different days. Okay, so your TAs that you have, you can go see, but you can also go see any of the TAs in general chemistry. So the TA rooms are open to you throughout the day, throughout their open hours, so you can get help from any of the TAs throughout Chem 1210 and 1220. We have probably like 100 plus TAs. So from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., Monday to Friday, you can find a TA somewhere. So Monday to Thursday, you can find them in 170 Celeste, which is over by the stock room. If you've gotten your lab coat, it's in that kind of area on the back hallway out of Celeste on the first floor. So Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., there's TAs there. That's a good homework question room. That's a good lecture question, exam prep room. That's most of our recitations TAs are meeting in that location. And then most of our lab TAs meet over in 205 Celeste. Once you get to Celeste, you'll see most of our labs are on the second and third floor. Room 205 is the middle room on the second floor. The second and third floors have kind of like little conference room type areas in the middle. Most of you guys probably haven't been up there yet, but there's a little conference room space. That's where you can get a lot of help, specifically with lab questions Monday to Thursday. Then on Fridays, all of our TAs meet there. So on Fridays, you can go to that location for everything. So again, like I said, a little bit confusing in that the 205 Celeste second floor room is kind of generally best for lab questions Monday to Thursday, but we opened it only on Fridays, but all of our TAs are in there, so you can take all your questions there on Fridays. And then Monday to Thursday, we call it the LRC, that's like the Learning Resource Center, that's why we call it that. That's where you can get generally your homework questions answered. And again, the key is you can meet with any TA anytime you want to drop by those open hours and get help throughout the semester. So that's a great place when you have that like last minute question on a lab report, like the day before it's due, you know you can drop by and get that question answered. There's a bunch of campus resources on that link there, it links you over to Carmen, but you can get much more information for campus resources. I think there's also a link to that on the main page when you log into our Carmen page. There's something new this semester that they are putting together through something called the MGen STEM Learning Assets Program, where they are setting up, they have like a team of learning professionals that are setting up courses and also study groups. The next slide here has some information on this. So they actually have a 1 credit hour, 80 minute per week study group that they're taking up to, I think, 400 people throughout general chemistry. If you didn't know this, there's, I think, 9 or 10 different offerings of Chem 1210 this semester, and there's about 2,800 students, I think it is, or 2,400 students total throughout Chem 1210. So they're looking to get as many as, I believe, 400 students into a study group, and then you'll meet in smaller groups than that throughout the week. They also have a center that's open if you're not enrolled in the class. So they have study groups that are available and a room that's available that you can drop into just to study and do some work. And so the center hours, let me zoom in a little bit more here. Monday to Thursday, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Fridays, it has some hours, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., and even hours on Sunday. I don't believe the study room hours are stocked with professionals that can help you, but it's a room that you can go to that can have other chemistry students that are trying to do homework just like you are trying to solve similar problems. So during the times, if you're not enrolled in the class, you can drop by and try to get help from your classmates. And then if you're interested in signing up for the class, you can sign up for the class. And I think they also have a few hours that they'll have some help staff available to you if you're not enrolled in that 1 credit hour class. But check out the QR code if you're interested in that. The slide here for this is also in the lecture slides area. So anytime I put a handout up, it's probably in lecture that you can find that handout or information in the lecture slides area of Carmen. So let's talk a little bit about online homework. It's 10% of your overall grade. The first required assignment is going to be due next Wednesday at 8 in the morning. All of our lectures are kind of what I call post-lecture. So that assignment due next Wednesday will generally cover the preceding lecture. We don't have lecture next Monday for Labor Day. So that'll generally be covering Friday's lecture this week on the material through that. So that's your first required assignment on Mastering Chemistry. I call those post-lectures. So all the post-lecture assignments are the quote-unquote required assignments through the semester. They're the ones that are worth points, so they have a point value. And then your accumulated points, your percentage of those points earned counts as your homework score. There's some ungraded assignments you'll find, like reading assignments are posted. Those are so you can see what I'm covering throughout the semester, and they get links right over into the e-text. So if you see the reading assignments, you can get to those from your Carmen calendar. They've all been synced into Carmen. You can link right into the readings from Carmen. So it helps you find the sections that we're covering and get to those in the e-text. But the reading assignments are really just links to the reading for the given lectures. And then, but there's nothing there that you need to do in terms of earning points. There's 2 assignments that are marked as due Friday night that you might see. Those are practice assignments. One of them is a chemistry review. If you want to check that out, you're welcome. And then another one is just an introduction to mastering chemistry. If you want to check that out, you're welcome to check that out as well. That'll just introduce you to like how to enter numbers and units and how to draw maybe some chemical structures when we get to that part of the class. There are penalties for wrong answers. Most of the required post-lecture problems that you'll be doing are multiple choice. And so if there's 4 multiple choice questions, if you miss on your first attempt, then you can get a 75% of the points for that question. But the questions you're going to find in the post-lecture assignments are in the readings. So if you do the reading of the covered material, you'll come across nearly every problem that's in the post-lecture assignment, and you can practice it there. It'll tell you the right, wrong answers in the reading as well. So if you want to make sure you get a good homework score and learn the material, which I think is probably more important, check out the readings, check out the problems that come up during the readings, and when you get to the homework assignment, you should generally find that it's a very similar, if not very same set of problems that you can then answer in the homework to get your credit for that post-lecture assignment. The way late policy works on these required assignments is that you get a 1% penalty per hour late. So this gets a little bit into the weeds, but I get a lot of questions on, well, what happens? Do I need to submit my homework? There's never a submission on the homework. When you do a Mastering Chemistry assignment, let's say there's 5 questions. As you do each question, it's saving your work and it's submitting it in real time. So let's say I get to 3 of the questions before class, before the due date, and then the other 2 I don't get to until after class. It only puts the late penalty on the 2 questions you did after class. And those first 3 questions you did, you earn your full credit because they were done before the deadline. So any work you can do before the deadline is not penalized. It's only any work you submit after class that's penalized. So worst case scenario, if you can't figure out how to do a problem and you really want to make sure you don't miss points on entering a wrong answer, just come to class, get some help, ask me after class. At most you'll be like 1 or 2% off for being an hour or 2 late on the assignment. But I don't think these questions you're going to find to be too challenging. They're really more like reading style kind of questions, just making sure you're staying caught up with the reading and staying caught up with the content. These assignments should be taking you less than 30 minutes. I get a quote on how long the assignments should take, and they're in the 15 to 30 minute range. So if you're finding that you're taking an hour plus to do the assignment, unless that's time spent reading, which I think is fair. I think it's fair to spend 30 to 60 minutes reading per lecture. That, in terms of doing the assignment, shouldn't take you that much time. Especially if you're coming to class, you should find the problems are an extension of what we're working on in class too. So again, homework problems should be similar to the problems that you'll come across in the textbook. So look at the practice and exam prep questions in the textbook. So again, make sure you don't pay for access. You've already paid to access the online homework and the e-text. So make sure you're not putting payment information in at any point during the setup process of your homework. I want to mention here too that there's something called daily quizzes. These are practice quizzes in Carmen. They're not for credit either. But if you go to the lecture module, there's a little daily quiz section. I'll show you that in a moment on how to get to it. There's a bunch of like PDF quizzes that you can take, just quizzes on paper on your iPad. And they are almost all multiple choice, very similar to exam questions. Most of them are old exam questions. And then that file is set up with like daily quizzes almost throughout the week, so that if you want to do a quiz like next Wednesday, you can go find a quiz for next Wednesday. That's roughly through the material at that point in the class. And they're usually review in nature, where you'll see questions when we get into 2 or 3 weeks from now across the full first couple weeks of the semester. So you get good review questions on those quizzes. Let's talk about lecture attendance. This is something relatively new. So my class this year, we're going to see how this goes. I think it's an easy way to come to class just to get credit. Starting next Wednesday, throughout class, once there's just going to be an attendance. It could be at the beginning, middle, or end of class, just kind of randomly. It'll just be a quick little quiz if you're here. You'll just mark it in Carmen. I think it'll just be a QR code that should link you right over to Carmen. So if you're here, you get your points, very easy. And then if you're not here, if you don't want to come to class, or if you miss class, you sleep in. It is an early class. I understand that not everybody is going to want to get up to come to class every day. There is an alternative assignment that you can do, and it's what we call a tutorial assignment on mastering chemistry. So you probably have seen in Carmen a bunch of assignments for the class, because every lecture is going to have the required post-lecture that you more or less have to do. The reading assignment, that's optional, but it links you to the e-text. And you'll also see the alternative tutorial assignment. In the alternative tutorial assignment, if you come to class, you can treat it as practice if you want to check it out. If you want to use it for your learning, it's there, it's available. It's kind of a way to read the textbook without like reading the textbook. It's like reading the textbook through examples, and it'll give you short little snippets of text to help you set up problems and understand the content. And I think it's a good replacement for coming to class. I also record and post lecture slides, so you can still record, or you can still watch and hear what happens in class after class. So that's the alternative assignment. If you do the alternative assignment, though, the only little caveat is you just have to take a picture of the completed assignment when you get to the end screen. Once you finish the assignment, do the last problem. It'll show you a little screen. The next slide will have a sample of what it looks like, and then you just post that to the assignment in the Carmen gradebook. So you get in Carmen assignments. So you go to Carmen assignments, find like lecture. Let's say next Wednesday's lecture 3. So if you missed the lecture, you go find the lecture 3 alternative assignment, and you upload that screenshot. Let me mention here too that you actually get 6 drops, not 3. So we're giving 6 drops, so you can miss these assignments 6 times throughout the semester without penalty. So if you forget the first couple, or if you don't, if you miss one here or there, it's not going to hurt your overall grade. So the screenshot looks something kind of like this. So whenever you finish an assignment, you'll see a screen. I did one that just kind of shows like your score on the assignment and the completion. I don't need it to be 100%. I don't need, like occasionally you can give up. So occasionally it's like X'd out, because I think if you give up on something, it'll probably like X out instead of check mark it as complete. That's okay as long as it's fairly random. So if there's like 5 activity problems, if you're occasionally giving up on problems, that's okay. Just like don't give up on the whole set. Just give it an honest attempt to do the problems. And again, this is a set that's generally quoted in the 20 to 35-minute range on how long these assignments should take to complete. So if you're keeping caught up with the class, I think you'll find that it's a pretty quick assignment too. But that's the alternative assignment if you want to get credit for coming to class without coming to class. The grading for that, like the uploading a picture, means I have to go in and check the picture or put the points in. So it's a manual task. You won't see your grade update automatically in Carmen. It'll take a day or 2, and I'll get to those and update them accordingly. One last thing to mention would be that there is a strict due date on this by midnight of the day of lecture. So like next Wednesday is the first time that we do this for a grade. So you either come to class next Wednesday, take the attendance quiz, it'll be a very easy quiz to take. It's not even really a quiz, it's just, are you here? Yes, okay, easy. And then if you're not here, you can do the tutorial assignment by midnight on that lecture day. And then you upload that picture to Carmen, and then you get your points as soon as I enter them into Carmen. How should you study in this class? Well, I've kind of already mentioned a few things. I think reading is really helpful, and I don't know how often you guys actually had textbooks anymore. Like, how many of you guys had a chemistry book when you took chemistry and that you took home with you? There's probably not that many hands. There's maybe 25% of the class raised their hand. My son's a freshman, his biology class, no book, no textbook anymore. So, I guess, they get a lot of handouts and give a lot of handouts in high school now in place of books. We're still in the world of having a textbook, and the textbook is okay. I mean, I think if you check it out, you'll find that it reinforces what you hear in lecture and really helps you make sure that you hear the concepts like with your eyes and see them and put them into practice and hopefully put them into your memory. But I think one of the better ways is by practicing and doing a lot of practice problems. So the practice problems can be those post-lectures, they could be the tutorial problems, they could be those daily quizzes too that can help you reinforce the material. So self-assessment is really important too. So having a good idea of being able to say, okay, once we finish chapter 1, well, I understand most of it, but that sig-fig topic I keep missing sig-fig questions. So I'm gonna go seek those out. One of the other things is you can now use like AI. You can use AI to take this sig-fig part of your book, copy and paste it into something like Google Gemini and say, make me a quiz out of this. Or you can go to Gemini and say, or to ChatGPT or whatever, make me a quiz on significant figures or on whatever it is you might need a quiz on. You can look for those problems on my daily quizzes and try to make sure that you're targeting those weak areas. So when you find that I have like hundreds of practice quiz problems, if you know what you're struggling with, you can really zone in on those questions and kind of ignore the others and not spend so much time on those. Try to not be so confused. Like if you find that something is just completely out of reach of your mind, let's go back a step or two. Let's go back to an earlier part of the chapter, read there, watch videos, use AI to help, come to office hours. Just try to find something that productively helps you move on and past what you were stuck on. The more we stay, like if we see a problem we don't know how to do and we just grind our gears for an hour, that's not a good use of time. A better use of time would be just go revisit something else. Like if we're stuck on something, find some other problem to think about or find an earlier topic to help us push through and maybe understand what we're stuck on. I think it says pre-lecture, but they're really post-lecture. Like I changed the pre and post word before at some point. But the post-lecture assignments are kind of meant to signify that we're covering the previous lecture. We're not trying to prepare you for the upcoming lecture on most of our assignments. We're trying to discuss what had been lectured on the previous lecture. So most of our assignments are review in nature, and it's meant to be almost like lectures, a little bit of an intro, active problem solving, a space for you to come into, get some help with your classmates, and then move forward through what we sometimes call the study cycle of then trying to practice and then try to lock into memory a lot of those things that we're practicing. So when we get to midterms, this is really, where we'll see the schedule in a minute if you've maybe already looked. We have, I've already forgot, 4 midterms this semester in the class. Roughly every 3 weeks, we're gonna be taking a midterm. When we come up to midterm 1, that's going to be probably the first stop check of like how well the first 3 weeks went. If the couple days before midterm 1, you're feeling great, you're feeling like you really have most of the concepts understood, you're getting most of your quiz questions right, we'll put some practice exams up. You take the practice exams and the questions look memorable and you get most of the questions right and you're doing well. If you're feeling really good, that means you had a successful either studying sessions throughout the first few weeks of the semester, or maybe you remember the content really well from high school too. Sometimes that happens as well. But if you find we get to a midterm and you have to study the whole weekend and grind out like you're studying to get through the midterm, let's look to things we could have done more productively over the first 3 weeks and try to put those things into work before we get to midterm 2. So that's my kind of thought is, the more you do now and Friday and next Wednesday will save you time from studying and having those like hard moments the night before a test where you can't figure something out, you get really stressed and anxious, and then the test comes up and we almost do worse then because we are so worried about the things we don't know because we are really down on ourselves and we go get an even worse score than we would have if we weren't in that situation. This book here is one that I recommend it's called Make It Stick. This book here, I read this probably 10 years ago now. It's a relatively older book, but it's on the science of successful learning. It's a really useful book especially if you want to go to med school. There's a lot of stories in this book of medical students in med school, some students that are studying like cognitive science. The writers of the book are actually cognitive scientists, so they approach how do we learn from a very scientific standpoint. And what they find is that it's the practice of repetition, it's the practice of recall of information that is really what we need to do to lock in concepts and content so that we can learn it for long periods of time. Trying to just memorize like a sheet of paper, like if you've ever had to memorize a list, it's pretty hard, but the easier thing to do sometimes is just try to see what you can recall from the list. My probably latest example of this was, for some reason I wanted to see if I could memorize all the elements. This was like a year ago or something. And I found that like I would keep getting stuck, or like I was like looking at a list and I would try to then reproduce it and I would keep getting stuck in the same spot. So I finally said, well, why don't I just go the whole way through the periodic table and see what I can't figure out, and then look and see what I missed. And then like a couple days later, try again. And it only probably took me 10 attempts or so, and I had the whole periodic table down, and I was timing myself. I got to about 4 minutes. The world record, I think, is like 3 minutes in that range. So I was getting close, and then I realized this is stupid. Like, my typing is bad, and there's no way I'm gonna get there. But it only took like 10 or so tries to memorize 118 elements, and it's from the recall of information. I could have studied the whole list of the elements and never really perfected it because I needed to type. I needed to get the muscle memory of typing all those names. It's the same thing with a bunch of concepts in chemistry. You need the muscle memory of pulling out that content and information and the practice of doing that to lock it in so that when we get to exams, you're good to go. So frequent quizzing is really important for learning. That's why I've tried to structure this class where most of the quizzing is low stakes so that you can use it to your own benefit, use it as you need it, that it's not a graded part of the class. It's not something you're trying to game for points. It's something that is just there so that you can use it to self-assess and use as part of your own learning. Let me show a few parts of Carmen here. Let me hopefully see if this works from my iPad screen. This is just in Canvas here. I'm in the Canvas app for this too. The web version looks a little bit different. But in here, you can get the start of term tasks that we were talking about. That's the link there. If you haven't seen that yet, definitely check out that link. See all the things that you should be doing over the first couple weeks. If you ever need to schedule a makeup exam, there's links on the main page for that. There's makeup labs. There's the lab supervisor email information about that. There's the resources page. That's where I said more resources earlier. That's a link to that information. The contacts page, that's the link over to office hours, where you'll find my office hours and the lab supervisor's office hours and links to some other folks in their office hours. Modules is the area where you can find the lecture slides, the daily quizzes. Let me show the daily quizzes real quick. So on the daily quizzes page, there's some info here. It gives you a sample info page that you can look at that sample info page as you do your work. And then there's quizzes throughout the week, kind of starting tomorrow night, I guess, is the first quiz. Now, again, these aren't required. These are only practice quizzes. The signifying of the days of the week is just to kind of lock you into where you're at relative to the course. So if you're in week 2 and you're wanting to find a quiz roughly through that point of the class, you might be looking for like Tuesday, week 2. There's a bunch of quizzes. Again, use these as you need them, self-assess through them, look for the quizzes and the topics that you're struggling with the most. Let me go back to modules and show you, if you haven't seen the lecture module, what that looks like. So this is what our lecture module looks like. There's this thing I wrote 10 plus years ago called Key Concepts of Chemistry from High School Chemistry. If you were to click on this, you get a document that I don't really think anybody's hardly ever read. It's pretty boring, I think, but it's like 10 pages of just kind of random high school chemistry type stuff. If you want to check that out, feel free. But something that I did that was kind of neat that you guys can do too. I could post my video of this if you guys think it would be useful, but you guys can make your own too, is I just took that and copied and pasted it into Notebook LM, which is a Google product, which we now have access to as members of the OSU community. So does anybody know what Notebook LM is? Like it's a tool that you can make like videos and podcasts and all kinds of goofy things there, like pictures and things. But you can go there and enter a document. It could be that document. It could be the chapter 1 if you download it from Pearson from the eText. It could be a lab manual handout. You can upload that document and say, make a podcast out of this. And it creates 2 people who like have a conversation about the handout and almost read it to you in a way where they're working it into conversation. So if you think that's interesting, it made a 20-minute video on an 8-page document that's probably pretty boring to read and kind of just goes through it. Only weird thing is it seems to mispronounce some chemistry words, and it has an issue with like calling PB for lead, PIB. So there's some weird like artifacts with it that hopefully over time get a little bit better. But that was something I found to be unique that you can set up and check out if you're interested. So use AI. Like if you're stuck on something, you can say, summarize this. Has anybody ever done that on chat? I'm sure you guys have done that. That's a fairly common thing. You can put a document into Google Gemini is basically Google's version of ChatGPT. Does anybody in this room pay for ChatGPT? Is anybody willing to say they pay $20 a month? The Google Gemini, I think, is about as powerful and free to you. So check that out if you haven't yet. Just go to like Google Gemini. You can link your OSU account to get the access through that. And they have links over to Notebook LM if you want to check that out too. Okay, so what else do I want to show here? In lecture, like that's where our slides are if you haven't found those yet. That link I was talking about for the study center is down below in the announcements area for the first lecture. And then I'll be posting videos probably through YouTube. I wasn't able to link my iPad the way I prefer to link it, where I record directly to my iPad. I'm having like use Zoom to record today. So I'm gonna see what the audio quality is like today and see how I'm gonna record. I could open the Zoom up to the class too, which would mean you could theoretically watch lecture from home. So we'll see if that works throughout the semester. But how to best record and post lectures. But you'll see links or YouTube links to the videos here in this area as well in Carmen modules. This is also in modules. At the very bottom of the list was our recitation activities. That's where you can find that first week's that intro activity that we were working on yesterday in recitation, so you can check that out. And that's also where this location, I'll post a key for that here later today. The grade book should be updated as your TAs are grading your work. As you're earning some points, some of the things are automatically graded. You'll see those pop up in the grade book. One thing to mention is some of your online digital assignments are not like automatically graded, and they won't appear in the grade book like instantaneously. The best example of this are those the post-lecture assignments on mastering. The weird thing is they link but sporadically, and I never figured out what the rhythm is. But like, let's say you do an assignment, it's worth 5 points, and then you get a 5 out of 5, and then you go check your Carmen gradebook grade, and it says like 2 out of 5. And you're like, what the heck, I got a 5 out of 5. Well, it'll correct itself within usually a half hour to an hour. I think it just every so often it updates the score. So it probably updated the score after you did question 2, and it just hadn't updated yet after you finished the assignment. So just know that there's going to be a lag on almost every assignment that you submit digitally, and there might be like little artifacts of it updating a grade before you finish the assignment. So you might see a partially completed score that eventually corrects itself. There's syllabus info. I mentioned kind of going through the syllabus. This syllabus is it's pretty dense. Okay, so the syllabus here has links to my contact info. Why is this not letting me scroll? Well, actually, since I'm recording this way, I can just go straight into Canvas. So in the syllabus area, you can see that we have a separate lab and lecture syllabus. I'm just going to look at the lecture syllabus. The lab TA and lab next Tuesday or Thursday when you have lab, we'll go through the lab syllabus. There's contact info here as well. There's lots of information here. Let's talk about the calculator policy real quick. This is for exams. So for exams in the class, you need to have one of these 4 specific types of calculators. And I really wish we could be more inclusive of calculators. And I don't know why we are so limiting on the specific calculators, but we do require one of these 4 specific types of calculators. So TI-30, there's 2 different types. The X2S is the better version of the TI-30. The TI-30XA is an older version of it. Those are available at like Target for probably like 15, 20 bucks. So you might want to go look for one of those cheaper ones if you need to buy a calculator. TI-83s and 84s are still pretty popular. A lot of you guys probably have those. You can use those on exams with various models of those allowed. So if you have something with the number TI-83 or 84 with whatever the model is, those will be okay for exams. I hate to say that a lot of other calculators fit those same types of things you can do in those calculators, but I guess it's hard for TAs to check calculators quickly when we have a lot of exams taking place. So that's why we have a short list of calculators. So you do need specifically one of those calculators. Even if you have like a Casio or a whatever brand calculator, it really needs to be one of those TI calculators. There's some information here on how like 10% homework, 5% lecture is part of your grade, recitations 5%, labs 20%, and then the remaining 60% of your grade are exams. And so 20% for the final, and then 10% for each of the 4 midterms. And so then let's eventually scroll down to there's some information here you can read through on absences and all that fun stuff. But, and here's another summary of the grading of the class that we just kind of mentioned. I'm gonna eventually get to, let's talk grades for a minute before we talk about the exam schedule. So the grades are shown here. So 92.5 and up is an A. It's a little bit more generous as you get to the A minus. It's 88.5 and up. And these cuts, you have to be precisely within 0.1% to round up. What does that mean? It means you will need a 92.40 or higher at the end of the semester to get an A. And that is like the only like quote unquote rounding that we do is like within 0.1 of each of these cuts. And I hate to say that. I hate to say if you end up with a 91.38 that you're going to end up with the A minus and not get that bump into the A range. But that's unfortunately what happens. Every semester somebody ends up very close to the line. I don't get any control over this. There's nothing I can do, unfortunately, to change a grade or to bump it or to move the grade scale to adjust to allow that grade to be included in the higher scale. But just know that with 300 plus students in this class, with the 2,400 other students, no matter where we put the grade cut, there's always going to be somebody right below that cut line. So there's almost nothing we can do to avoid having somebody right on the edge of where the next higher grade was. But just know that these grades are really solid. You know, like this is the grade scale that we're going to use with 0.1% rounding. You know, so 92.4, 88.4 are really the true cuts that we're going to apply at the end of the semester. So there's a little bit of a curve, or not curve, a little bit of a rounding, but it's only 0.1%. I just want to be upfront with that so you know that, expect that. But just know that plenty of students get into med school with all different kinds of grades in Chem 1210. You know, so if you get that B plus and you really thought you need an A, you'll get to exactly where you want to go with a B plus just as much as you will with an A. So, and maybe in high school, although I don't feel this is the case with my son already in high school, I don't think they just give out A's. I think the society thinks that they just hand A's out. Do you guys feel like your school just handed A's out? Was it easy to get A's? Raise your hand if you think it's easy to get A's in your high school. There's not a lot of hands up. There's some hands. Maybe this depends on the school, depends on the teacher. But most teachers are usually pretty strict. They want you to learn. They want you to pass the exams to get an A. So I think it's hard to get an A almost anywhere these days. But at the end of the semester, we usually get about a third of the class in that solid A range. I wish it was everybody. Like and really, as many people that end up as over the 92.4% will earn an A. But at the end of the semester, it is usually a good chunk of the class that get into that A range. Let's talk exam dates. There's the coverage if you want to read through that, the basic lecture schedule. It's kind of funny to bury the lead. The important thing is, what are the exams? That's where we're earning 60% of the points in the class. The exams are Tuesday, September 16th, and these are in recitation. So the exams will take place during your recitation session. Some of you guys may take them at a testing center. They'll be generally within like a week of when the recitation is, if you have makeup situations, alternative exams, those things that come up. But if you're taking it in recitation, you'll be meeting in recitation that week to take your exam. The first exam is over chapters 1 and 2, second exam chapters 3 and 4, then 5 and 6. We cut a section off of chapter 5. We'll talk about that when we get to it. That's midterm 3. We have a little bit of a hodgepodge for midterm 4, where it's part of 7, all of 8, most of 9, and then a couple sections of 9 we save for the final, and then the final exam is cumulative in nature. And so roughly every 3 weeks, so it's week 4 that we take our first exam, then week 7, 10, and 13, so 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks we're taking an exam. Okay, so that's the information there. Some links to makeups, alternate exams if you need that information throughout the semester. There's also links to that from the main page of Carmen. Okay, so I think that's about all the syllabus I want to mention. One last detail I'll mention just overall about the course is as you're submitting assignments, especially for lab, be careful copying and pasting work. They do a Turnitin search, they do a cited work search. So if you're copying and pasting sources, it's going to pick it up in the grading. So just make sure when you're ever doing writing, it's not a whole lot of writing in this class, but just make sure it's your authentic own words and ideas. Okay, so I think that's everything I wanted to show on Carmen. This could be crazy. Do you guys have any questions? Who has a burning question that maybe something I missed, or sometimes there's like 50 questions and then it's like, all right, we're gonna be here for 3 weeks taking questions. Okay, if you do have questions about the class, anything that I missed, if you wanted to introduce yourself, feel free. I'm not gonna necessarily end just yet. I'm gonna go into a couple slides, do a demo before we wrap up. But if you do have questions about the class, feel free to ask me after lecture. Let me go back to my slides and remember a few things I wanted to talk about before I blow up this balloon over here. Well, exam info, calculator info was here too in the notes. There was more of our recitation info. Again, remember for the recitation sessions that have activities, I didn't show that slide in the syllabus. It's linked in the recitation module, that the recitation starting next Tuesday that have activities. So when you see activity 1 for a week, that's a required attendance for points in recitation, that those 10 activity weeks you attend and just do an activity, submit it to Carmen. Your TA will give you info on that in recitation, and then you'll get your points very easily for mostly just attending and participating on those activities. Lab info, again, I was highlighting that Turnitin detail, so just know that we're going to use Turnitin. That's the only thing I want students to know ahead of time. I think your TAs will talk about that too. But you have separate lab staff. There's lab supervisors, there's a lab team, there's your lab TA. Those are your main contacts for most of your nitty-gritty details, your policy questions for lab. If you have concept questions for lab, of course, I can certainly help you with those. One thing I like to mention too is if you're on a lab and you feel like you didn't write down the right number, don't change the number. Like you gotta, like your data as you record it in lab is your data. You gotta like use that data. Even if you think you made a mistake, you gotta keep the mistake and run with it. If you think you made such a huge mistake, it's an obvious mistake, you gotta email your TA and figure out what you need to do in that case. Fudging data is something as scientists, I think it's a good practice to say on day one that you just can't change data if it doesn't seem to fit the narrative that you want it to fit. That seems like a good practice to have. If you're unsure about anything, the syllabi are thick. I mean, Control F, searching for something in the syllabus is really helpful, so check that out if you need to. I'm always happy to answer questions, even if, like you can email me a question, even if you feel like it's in the syllabus and you should be able to find it, but you just can't find the answer, email me, I'm happy to help. Stop by office hours, et cetera, as needed throughout the semester for all of us, for me, the TAs, lab supervisors. Okay, I just wanted to quickly get to a demo where I can blow up a balloon, because I think that's always a fun thing to do on the first day of class. And as we study chemistry, I think we all kind of know it's a study of matter. It's a study of the transformations of matter, properties of matter, structure of matter. We'll get into those concepts here in this class. The uses of this class. Now, a lot of you guys are probably here because you had that pre-health requirement, and chemistry is one of the pre-med requirements. And why is chemistry a pre-med requirement? Well, I think it's really like a precursor to take OChem. Organic chemistry is really what you need to know, I think, as a pharmacist, as a physician, as somebody who's going to be prescribing medications. I think we have to know the structures and functions of molecules and some of their properties and what goes into that and how you can sort of picture a molecule and all that. And to get to there, you got to start in Gen Chem. It's like you got to learn the basics of chemistry before you can get to level 2 and OChem and beyond. So I think there's many aspects throughout science that chemistry is important. I think I'll save this slide for later, but what I wanted to start with is a really basic chemical reaction in a slide that kind of has information that we'll be talking about for the first couple weeks of class. So on this slide, we see an example of a balanced chemical reaction. That's a topic of chapter 3. I'm sure you guys have been through balancing reactions, really basic. We see the phases indicated that we have gaseous hydrogen. H2 is the molecular form of hydrogen. That's its most stable form at room temperature. O2 exists as molecular oxygen. Very deep questions could be, well, why is hydrogen H2 and not H? And it's just, well, for whatever reason, hydrogen is more stable as H2. That's a little bit of a topic of chapter 8 and 9 when we get into bonding and we start talking about single versus double bonds. You might remember that O2 has a double bond. N2 does this too, but it's a triple bond. We'll try to understand why O2 is double, H2 single as we go through the class. You see the delta H symbol. That delta H symbol is the enthalpy change of the reaction. That's a topic of chapter 5. You may not have ever seen that before, but you probably did at some point in high school. That's indicating that when this reaction takes place, it's going to give off a lot of energy. And we can see that given off here because we have hydrogen and oxygen in a balloon that are happy enough to exist next to each other provided there's no spark. And so we're going to give a spark to this reaction and kind of see it take place. And it's going to give off that energy pretty quickly. So when I get into position to do this demo, what I'm going to have you guys do is with the palms of your hands, you're going to have to go over your ears really good. Not like, don't do this or this. You're going to have to use the palms of your hand. I'm going to have to wear hearing protection myself to do this. So this is going to be pretty loud. It's going to go kaboom. I'm going to turn the lights down so that we can see it. So yeah, let's check this out. Somebody usually tries to record, but somebody in the front row wanted to balance or set up something to record that they don't have to hold. You're welcome to do that. It'll take me a minute or two there. Get ready there. So I think we have a video taker right here in the front, so I think we're all set up to record. Down. Hopefully the candle doesn't fall. All right. So get your ears. All right, here we go. Our first reaction. Well, that's our first reaction. Hopefully most of the reactions we do don't blow up. Usually the job is the chemist to have that not happen. But it's always fun to start a semester off by having an explosive first reaction. Now the thing that's really interesting here is that that you may think that this reaction's bad, like, well, what good can come from this reaction? Well, this actually could be used in a hydrogen fuel cell. If you have a fuel cell, you have hydrogen and oxygen separated by a membrane, and you'll have this reaction take place without a kaboom, and you can use it to generate electricity. So there's ways you can take a reaction like this, change the way you carry it out. Instead of with the spark, just connect the reaction with a wire, with a membrane between so the hydrogen and oxygen aren't directly touching each other, and you can actually have a useful fuel source that you can use to power a car or other devices. So we'll talk about some of those applications, some of those things as we go throughout the class. So that'll do us for today. Thank you guys for coming in. If you have questions, feel free to stick around after class. Thank you guys.